that we're live on YouTube now.
Okay. Good evening. Sorry I was delayed slightly. Are we ready to start or?
Yes, I think we're ready to start.
I see we've all got our titles up, that's good. Members, if you can all stay on mute as normal and just use the hand up function when and where you want to speak, that'd be great. So we'll start. Vicky, apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got no apologies other than Councillor Madeley, who's having technical difficulties, so I'll probably join us later on in the meeting if he can. And perhaps I can take this opportunity to do a roll call of the members that are present. So if I call your name out, can you unmute yourself and indicate that you're present, please? Councillor Barrett.
Yes, here.
Councillor Brockbank.
Here.
Councillor Heseltine.
Miss.
Councillor Ireton. No, he's not with us. Councillor Liss.
Here.
Councillor Madeley's given his apology. Councillor Morell. No. Councillor Mulligan.
Here.
Councillor Myers.
Yes.
Councillor Norton.
Present.
Councillor Place. Councillor Place. Just unmute yourself if you can.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Yes.
Councillor Welsh.
Unmute, Richard.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Wheeler.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm here too, Chair.
Yes. Councillor Foster. Thank you.
Confirmation of minutes. Members looking round, see if any hands shoot up. Nobody's waving. Councillor Myers. You're moving them.
I was moving them. Yeah. Sorry.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Liss indicated. Oh, so we're all happy, members. I can't see any hands come up, so we'll take that we can move forward. Public participation.
We haven't had anybody indicating they wish to speak, Chairman. Thank you.
Item 4, declarations of interest. Again, I'm looking around the room, or the screen, should I say, to see if anybody's waving. Can't see anybody, no hands gone up, so we'll move on from that. Item 5. Sorry, on the minute, just a quick update, Richard, if you would, on the last meeting as to where we are with the, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we had the application window which closed last week. We had just over 300 applications from a whole range of businesses. We've been through those and done some initial validations which identified 20 odd or so that had previously already had grants, possibly a few more actually. And it looks like we're left with a figure of around about 268 payments that we're due to make. And those are within the sort of boundaries of the scheme that we set out last week. So like I say, it's a range of different types and different size businesses. And it looks as though on that basis that the majority of the grant funding of the 1.2 million should be used, bar an element that a small element that will be retained, which will help us to deal with any appeals or issues that arise following the payment process. So we're still doing some final validation and just firming up on the approval process. And if that's all complete, then I don't see any reason why we can't start to make the payments as of tomorrow. So it seems to be moving forward reasonably well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't really want to take a great heap of questions on that. It was just sort of for an update, unless anybody's desperate wants to looking around. I just thought it would help to know that we are moving forward and payments are coming. Agenda item 5, finance update. I'll hand over to Patrick for this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members, this is an update on the potential financial implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I would emphasize the word potential. I think as we read through this report, it's very clear that there are a lot of unknowns that lie ahead of us that we can't really predict the exact nature of the council's finances going out the next several months, even the next year. So in paragraph 3, I'm just going to say a word or two, and then I'll let Richard answer specific questions. In paragraph 3, the report identifies 6 areas in which there have been 6 potentially significant impacts. Income losses, the funding we receive from council tax and business rates, additional costs, government support, and financial management response, community and business support. And there's a section of each of these in the report. And the 2 I would like to focus on, which I think are the 2 most significant, are the income losses and government support. So if we look at just page 2 of your report, members, it's quite interesting, that pie chart at the top, which shows that 39% of how we fund our budget is through external income. And it's very interesting, I thought, in the body of the report, where it says that SIPFA, which is the public sector accounting body, published its annual financial resilience index in January. And at that time, we were considered to be very low risk because we have a significant portion of our income from external income, and other councils might have been relying more on central government funding, and that was very uncertain. Now, how things have changed, because due to the pandemic, our external income portion has absolutely collapsed. And so that's a large part of our budget, which was considered to be safe previously, and now has some problems. So that area of income is significant. And that is one area I'm concerned about, because again, we don't know at what rates that might pick up again when the car parks are open, when the shops, which are now open, the pubs, the cafes. It's hard to predict how many people will be using the car parks, for example, and what our income might be from there. And the other one is the government support. And to date, we have received 2 tranches of funding. The first was £26,000 and the second was £565,000. But if you look at paragraph 3.2, we are predicting the impact of the financial year between £2 and £4 million. So that funding, while welcome, is not nearly enough to help us meet those challenges that we're facing. So whether or not the government is going to come forward with some further support, we don't know. We would love that to be the case, but there's not been an indication of that as of yet. And then the last thing I want to try to end on a positive note, I think in 3.22, there's the description of how the council had an allocation of £26.8 million to do the business grants, and 23 million of that was distributed. And I think that our officers did a fantastic job. They did it in a very efficient and timely way. And I know the businesses in the district really appreciated that support. And again, with the latest grants that we're doing, that Richard just mentioned earlier, we're doing the same thing. So I would really like to thank our officers for the great work they've done. And I know they've done it. It's been very difficult as well. They've worked their backsides off, to be honest. So thanks again for that. Now, so thank you, members. I'll hand over to Richard if there are any further questions.
I'll take it you move that, Patrick, as well. You better say out loud, Patrick.
Councillor Mulligan, you just need to unmute yourself, Councillor Mulligan.
Thank you. So the recommendations are 2.1, consider the potential financial impact and to note the actions taken and being developed in response. And 2.2, to note the additional expenditure approved under emergency delegated powers as part of the council's immediate response. The expenditure will be charged directly to government grant funding. Thank you. I move those recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mulligan. Members, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Richard. I'm grateful to Richard for answering some questions in advance. I just wonder if you could just highlight a couple of bits of information that for the other members here. When I questioned about government support in 3.14, I think, Richard, you talked about looking at consideration of capitalisation of losses and writing off tax and rates losses. Have you got any further with that, and is there a rough figure that you could attach to that? That's the first question.
Do you want to do them all, Mark, or
do you want to do it one at a time? I've got about three.
Do them all now.
Okay. We talked about the potential degradation of service costs, but with the way that things are moving, do you feel that this is something that's going to decrease quite dramatically in terms of the level of service we can provide? And I think then we looked at the capital plan, and again, I question whether some of the capital projects that we had, are there some that may or may not be curtailed? Because the question I asked was, when we had our briefing at the start of the year, I got the impression that most of them were pretty much cast in stone and they were going ahead. But you know, thankfully you gave an answer saying, well, there are some projects at different stages of being put in place. So some of the early ones may be under review. And I wonder if you could give a bit more detail to members as to which of those projects that you think may be under review in light of the potential shortfall. And I think that was it. And I know I asked about resources for your department as well. Again, coming back on Councillor Mulligan's point, I can appreciate a lot of hard work that's been going on there. And as of the end of last week, you said that there was adequate resources for your department to keep on top of all this. But I'm wondering whether that might change. And a question that is for audit next week, but something you may want to touch upon is, are you likely to replace all the audit days that were scheduled into ones that are post-COVID audits? I think that's all the questions. Thank you.
Richard, Patrick, Richard.
Okay, shall I start then? First question first. Government support for capitalisation and whether there are options to carry deficits through collection funds over a longer period than 1 year. So at the moment, if a deficit arises from council tax collection or business rates in 1 year, or other than making some provision around bad debts and non-payment, the biggest impact of that would be in the following year, because of the way the collection fund works, and it would have to be addressed in that following year. So collectively, and it's still being raised nationally as a range of measures that might be considered. You know, is the point that, well, could those deficits as they arise be written off over a longer period, say 5 or 10 years, so that the impact isn't all in 1 or 2 financial years? So it doesn't fully resolve the problem, if you like. It just spreads it over a longer period of time, and you know, that might be one of the tools in the box that's available. The other one would be to seek a direction from government to be able to capitalise some of the losses again, which isn't making them disappear magically. It's bundling them up into a sum that can be borrowed and repaid again over a longer period. So it's to spread the impact of some of those income losses. You know, ideally, all of our losses and drops in funding collection, you know, would all be funded centrally, and it's not an issue for us. But the reality seems to be closer to we'll get some government support, and we're likely to have to deal with some of the problem ourselves. But as Councillor Mulligan said, you know, for us and the nature of our council, it's those two. Yes, we will likely see some impact on collection of council tax, and business rates is going to be problematic. But you know, in terms of planning and decision making, the length and degree of income loss this year and the level and degree of government support are probably the two key variables that will have the biggest and most immediate impact for us. So that was a long-winded way of saying those things are still being lobbied as potential. I'm not going to say the solution, but part of the response to the problem, along with further government support as well. Service levels, you asked about, you know, the demands on the finance department, but I think the same is true across the council. We have, through CLT and a pandemic response team, a very close grip on any issues arising within services that are becoming problematic or hotspots that need to be dealt with. And as I said in my response, so far we're dealing with everything that we need to deal with, maintaining service levels and all of our statutory and other regulatory responsibilities. And it's through those mechanisms at CLT and the PRT that we would you know, look to identify risks and problems before they become you know, big issues, and that we can deploy staff differently or look to bring in additional resource if we need to. On the capital plan, yes, that's right. In terms of, you know, the plan is made up of a number of schemes. Some were new schemes for the current year, others were schemes that had carried forward from previous years. And what I wanted to do really was just ask all of the project managers or those responsible for those projects to give an assessment of deliverability within the year, any particular risks around deliverability or cost or funding that might arise, so that we could assess the risk really. And I'm still in the process of formulating all of those responses, but you know, it's reasonably clear that there are a range of projects that are just, you know, so far completed that you know, it would make no sense to stop them now. There are others that are likely to be delayed just simply because of the situation that certain works can't be completed in the timescale that was originally thought. There are some that are just generally not particularly affected, and others that hadn't started, and you know, there's a choice to be developed, which would need to come back to members about whether some of those could be deferred to a future year. You know, if that helped with, say, our cash flow position. Now, early on in the financial year, sort of April time, our cash flow was an issue that I was concerned about, because obviously we weren't getting the revenues in. There was concern about how quickly people would pay council tax and what have you, and it would have been sort of problematic. But since then, the government has deferred some of the payments due to it until the end of the financial year, which has helped in terms of cash flow management. They paid some of the grant reliefs around rates up front rather than incrementally throughout the year as well. So those things have sort of eased the cash flow worries, if you like. So deferring a capital project on the basis of that is less of a risk than it was probably 6 weeks ago. But a fully updated view on the capital plan will come back to members in due course. But what I wanted to do internally at an early stage was just identify within the capital plan where some of the key sort of risks were, and if any immediate decisions needed to be taken as a consequence. There are some projects that the business cases that were approved need to be reviewed, and in some cases they might need to be revised, and those will come back to members also for a decision as well. I think the resources for the department I've probably covered in the previous answer, but just tell me if not. And the audit days, yes, I mean, the initial discussion with internal audit was that the focus of days allocated in our plan this year should, I suppose, just for practical reasons to begin with, be focused on trying to assist with the compliance and regulatory elements and some of the risks around the business grants payments. So Harrogate are engaged in using some of those days in this year's plan now to do the governance and regulatory checks around the business grants that have already been paid. I mean, that's not all they've been doing, but you know, so some of their work has also been focused around how the council's managing the response, you know, and some of those wider issues. But it was, you know, a sort of a new, you know, an extraordinary event in terms of those grant payments, and there's specific work that needs to be done, and internal audit are engaged in that process. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just before we carry on, Councillor Ayrton's joined us, so just for information, Councillor Myers.
Yes, apologies, Chairman. I struggled to get connected. It wouldn't accept the password.
Yeah, they are complicated. Councillor Myers, if you'd like to unmute.
Love to, thank you, Chairman. Yes, just on the capital projects, obviously, as Richard has said, some are well advanced, and of course some of them, which are very important to the economy of Craven, its resilience and hopefully its rebuilding, are rather time sensitive. We may have invested some seed money, but we're in receipt of substantial grants from external bodies like the LEP, and we have to deliver these projects, so that has to happen. But they were all in the first place aimed at economic growth and regeneration. So it's to be hoped they will help with the task that we have in Craven ahead of us. And of course, Richard's quite right. Some of the business cases for some projects in the pipeline will have to be reviewed in the light of the fact that we're living in a very different world, and that affects us as it affects every business in Craven. But yeah, I would like to thank Richard and his team. They really have stepped up to the mark, as have all officers, in dealing with something that is completely unexpected, completely unprepared for, and they've had to adapt and work very hard to deliver the help that has been needed. So thank you very much, Richard. It's much appreciated, and to all your team and all teams.
Probably it was more of a statement, wasn't it? I know you've got a question there, Richard. From my point of view, was in a DCN District Councillors Network conference call on Monday. The Secretary of State for Local Government was on, and there is something out there coming for local government, just what it is, how much it is, and where it is. And it may not be as in a big cash bung, but it might be some of the capitalisation things that Richard's been talking about, potential to maybe carry on with new owners bonus, a few of the things that are up in the air. And and also to feed into the spending review, you know, as to how they're going to finance local government into the future. So I think we can expect short-term statement probably within the next couple of weeks, and then something definitely in the autumn statement about how they're going to, you know, finance local government into the future. They do appreciate we've done a lot of work for them. We've been of a huge help. So I think, you know, they're not ignoring us out government in our pleas that this has cost us a lot of money, as you know, both district and county councils, and that we do need further support in some way, shape or form. It's not falling on deaf ears. Whether it is when it gets to Treasury or not, I don't know, but I'm hoping it isn't. But we'll see. I think there's a funding package on its way from government, and when you look at these figures, we do need something. Luckily, Craven was financially not in too bad a position with reserves, etc. Some authorities have been very, you know, don't have the luxury of what Craven's amassed over the last few years. It's all earmarked. It's all supposed to be going into schemes that are going to be for the good of Craven. But if we've got to pull back on some of those and maybe delay them, then we'll have that to do in order to make sure, you know, we get the council through this. But fingers crossed we can do both. We can get a bit more investment from the government and get on and deliver those schemes, because I think a lot of them are going to be vital for the regeneration of the district. I'm looking around for any other members with hands up. Nobody's waving at me. Any other people wishing to? Councillor Rose, you're unmuted. Go for it. You're muted. Yep.
Thank you. Have you got me? Is that okay? Can I speak? Yes?
Yep, here you. Yep, fine.
Thank you. Going back to the capital plan and the various projects on that list, which must be quite phenomenal. I'm interested in knowing how far will there be any effect on the development of the town hall in Skipton, because that is obviously a crucial aspect of regeneration and the rest of it, if you like, with respect to Skipton and Craven as a whole. Will those developments, will that project be affected very considerably, or is the funding sorted for that? Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was really one of the projects that I suppose is nearing completion, and so that was one where, you know, the capital scheme was approved and underwritten by the council with a hope to attract additional external funding, you know, as much as possible, I guess, really. So the nature and the assumption around how that was to be funded in the current year is still the same, and you know, when we've at CLT looked at the projects, you know, that given where that one is, I mean, I think there are some adjustments to the costs that will need to be reported, as some elements of the scheme have cost more than original estimates, and that will need to come back through. But in terms of continuation, then, you know, the project is to continue. You know, it wouldn't be stopped from a financial sense, put it that way. You know, and I think because it's nearly complete anyway, compared to others, then it would be far more costly to stop it at this stage anyway, if you're purely looking at it from a financial perspective.
Councillor Wheeler, but I'm going to take Councillor Myers beforehand. I think he will probably want to come back on that point.
Yes. As Richard says, as far as the town hall's concerned, the money for that was committed a long time ago, and has been taken into account in our successive budgets. And as Councillor Rose says, it will, in fact, contribute greatly to the recovery of Craven as a hub. as a cultural destination and financially, which is part of the purpose for what we did, because that building 5 years ago was costing us £300,000 a year to keep open, and failing to supply any of the good that it should. And the idea is, of course, that it pays for itself, and certainly there's quite a lot of evidence at the moment to suggest that the regeneration of economies will be greatly assisted by cultural input and education and so on, and that's part of what we've been doing. Richard kindly has hinted that I might have to address a future policy committee about there being a slight shortfall or rather slight overspend, and I really look forward to doing that. I can't tell you, the officers know how pleased I am that I will be having to come and just say that there is a slight variance. Hopefully it will be at some time when I'm away somewhere and without broadband connection, and one of them can do it. But generally it's going very well, and I did go the other day with appropriate social distancing measures to have a look at how it's getting on, and to have a distanced meeting with the architects, and it is progressing very well. The contractors have now been working with the appropriate safeguards, and it's progressing well. So it will be something of a beacon of hope. And of course, as I'm going to say shortly, it's very important we get the high street up and running, and not just in Skipton, in all our market towns, but this is going to be an important part of Skipton's offer.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, Simon, we're happy to take your overspend mitigation via Zoom from a Mediterranean seafront cafe. Right, Richard, you touched upon reserves. Just quick question. Knowing the level of reserves we've got, and again, grateful for Richard for sending me the table. Hopefully we don't have to use reserves to shore up any shortfalls, but looking at some of the reserve headings, there might be some that could be likely candidates. Are there any that you're looking at that we may have to use in terms of for damming up any shortfalls?
Well, as part of reviewing everything really in terms of revenue, capital and reserves, I've been through all of the reserves, and we've got this distinction, haven't we, between our general balances, which are, not earmarked for anything particular, but really there for emergencies, and that's just under £1 million, and is a good level of general balance for a council this size, good in a prudent way, I mean. And then we've got the reserves, which are earmarked reserves, and they're all by definition earmarked for something. Some of them are for future capital investment, some of them are for the management of a particular risk or unknown liability, and some of them are sort of to do with timing and when money's been received and when it'll be paid out and what have you. So there's a range of things in there, and using any of those or any amounts from reserves as part of the solution to the problems this year probably seems likely. That would seem to be a likely expectation to some extent from government, that we would make some contribution. And so it's understanding what the impact of that would be. I mean, we've got general balances for unexpected events and emergencies, and this situation seems to tick those boxes really. But any draw on those balances or the earmarked reserves and reapportioning of those earmarked reserves has a consequence in terms it sort of weakens our overall financial resilience. So by using any of them, we have to understand what the consequences and the risks are. And if we were to look at one of the most significant of those earmarked reserves, it's the New Homes Bonus. you know, some of which is earmarked for particular schemes. So presumably we wouldn't want to withdraw our commitment to those. And the majority of the balance was there to develop future schemes and future aspirations that haven't yet, you know, got to that approval stage. So for example, any use of that particular reserve, you know, doesn't result in a drop in service because it's not funding day-to-day services, but it severely weakens the council's aspirations going forward, for example. And if, you know, as we get more sort of into the roles councils will play in terms of the economic recovery, then, you know, by using those reserves to solve this issue, then we don't have that capacity to use them again. But I mean, any proposal to use them will be reported in due course. But you know, there's a range of options in there that could be up to 2 million, depending on the mix and the level of risk that we're prepared to take. But I'm not sort of suggesting that we make any sort of decisions or commitments to do that at this stage, because each of those decisions has its own consequence.
I'd just like to add to that, Mark, that, yeah, some of the reserves are, well, I know you like to call them vanity projects, but some of the reserves, some of the reserves are for more superficial things, potentially, in a way, but in actual fact, those are the ones that potentially could deliver us a really good come out of, you know, coronavirus and a really good response. So before we go chewing into them today, but I do think we're, you know, everything's up for grabs in a way with the reserves. If we can delay replacing a bin truck right the way through to doing anything else in order to make sure that Craven comes through this strongly, then, and it'll all come before the policy committee before we make a decision on those things. So people know which pots we're going into and why we're going into it and what the reasoning is, and you know what the consequences of doing that might be. But I mean, having what we have as a general fund balance for emergencies has to be the first place we look, and then we can recoup that over the next 3 or 4 years if we have to, you know, in order to raise that back up. But I think that's got to be the first aim that we're after. I've Councillor Myers coming back in.
Just to note, Chairman, members will be aware that there was a sort of SOS fund of capital projects announced by the government at very short notice, which gave, I think, we call him Mr. Ben, David Smurthwaite, about 48 hours to come up with capital projects that could be accelerated by government grant in order to achieve growth in the short term. These were quick deliver, oven ready projects, and David put in a comprehensive and very good bid, which he managed, I think, with the help of Sharon and others, no doubt, to get together in no time at all. If any of those come through, of course, it will assist in delivering those projects. It will take pressure off some of those earmarked reserves. So there may be some that will come out of it. And there may be other ways of getting assistance with government that frees up some of the monies we have earmarked.
I don't think it's been seconded, so I'm quite happy to second it from the chair. I'm looking around other members, just seeing if there's a hand waving, if somebody's desperate to come in at this point. It don't appear to be. So do we need to take a vote on this? Because it's for noting, I note. Annette?
Yes, if we could, Vicky, if you wouldn't mind just doing a very quick roll call of members, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
I don't know what we're for or against, that's all.
Okay. Right, okay, Councillor Barrett.
For.
Councillor Brockbank.
For.
Councillor Heseltine.
For.
Councillor Ireton.
I missed part of the debate, so I shall abstain.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Liss.
For.
Councillor Mulligan.
4,
Councillor Myers,
Or
Councillor Noland,
4.
Councillor Place,
4,
thank you. Councillor Rose,
4.
Councillor Welsh,
4.
Councillor Wheeler,
4.
thank you. And then there's yourself, Chairman.
4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item then, agenda item 6, the Craven COVID-19 economic recovery plan. I believe, Simon, you're taking this one.
yeah. Again, members will appreciate that this is something that officers have had to do a lot of work on at very short notice. Not just officers here, but officers with the York and North Yorkshire LEP. It's feeling its way towards a recovery plan rather than being something cast and immutable. And a number of members also in a meeting with David perhaps a few weeks ago did feed into this, and obviously we're very grateful for any thoughts members have about ways in which we can assist our district in economic recovery. I apologise for Labradors misbehaving. Members will particularly note with concern and perhaps no real surprise the predicted economic effect of this pandemic on Craven. Having been through foot and mouth, we're perhaps very well aware of the effect that restrictions and lockdown and a diminution in confidence and in tourism has on an area such as ours. Historically, we have had very high rates of employment, and everyone in this meeting will be distressed to see that unemployment in Craven in the month of April rose by 170%. And that is, of course, before the furlough scheme stops. And we can only expect that that will get worse. And so as a district economy, and really almost more than that, in building a more resilient economy, things such as diseases and pandemics, that they have such a devastating effect on local prospects, jobs, employment, and the ability of the economy to pay its way. So these are early days, members, and you'll note the body of the report and what is being proposed by the LEP in terms of a draft recovery plan, some of which we're already on with, as for example, reconfiguring the high street, which has, I think, been working quite effectively in Skipton. There are many other steps that are noted in the body of the report in terms of what we can do to support businesses in terms of innovation, in terms of coping with continuing to be in business, continuing to be able to trade with the restrictions that are imposed even now by the pandemic. So there are a number of steps that we can take, and you are asked to note those, and you're also asked to please do feed in with any ideas that you have in terms of how we can face this challenge on behalf of our district. You'll see at paragraph 5, members, the Craven local recovery actions, which effectively do cover the areas which I've discussed, increasing pedestrian access across the district so that shops, markets and so on can function is very important. giving businesses the link to where they can seek proper advice and support is very important. Supporting the unemployed, which is going to be an increasing challenge, extremely important. One thing that we, wearing a slightly different hat as chairman of the licensing committee, we are very concerned to do is to effect a change to the current licensing regulation, short term of course, which will enable licensed premises to supply off license during the restrictions. So to aid those businesses in our district and up the Dales in continuing to trade despite the restrictions on social distancing and so on. And we are in communication with the Minister and our own MP, seeking government to, which they could do very easily, to bring in temporary changes to make that happen tomorrow, as they did with food outlets and deliveries and so on for restaurants. So we do need a bit of support with that. I wish government would get on with it. The LGA have been petitioning them, as have we. And then members note the second part of this is the reopening of the High Street Fund, and this you are asked to consider in terms of the £50,000 which we've received from central government to support the reopening of our towns and villages. And you'll see at paragraph 6 and 6.1, members, the proposed expenditure of that fund. £20,000 to business support to retailers, hospitality and tourism, 4,000 per town for support of service settlements to fund costs such as signage, and then £6,000 to establish entertainment and alcohol licenses across Craven. I'm hoping we won't need to spend that because government will do it for us, but it's important we have that in our budget, because we don't want that to fall on the very businesses that are struggling at the moment. So we're trying to make that work without asking them for another £300 or £400. Members will note, of course, as I've said, the efforts that have been made so far. And so I'd ask for your support on the proposals for spending those funds, members. And then the third part of this is something that I think could be very, very useful indeed, and that is the proposal that we have a subcommittee of this committee to oversee the economic recovery of our district. And as more or less support comes out from central government, one that is able to consider the implications of decisions that are made and funding that becomes available, and to report back to the policy committee, but to have a view, an overview of the recovery and its planning that requires more detail than perhaps we'll be able to do in a policy committee with all its other considerations to deal with. And if members are happy with that, I'd ask them and group leaders to work out those who are keen on this and would like to participate. It will require a report to come back to this committee. The one thing I would say is I've spoken to a couple of sort of prominent businesses in the district over the last few weeks about regeneration and regaining business. And there are people who are not elected councillors who might be quite happy to come and help and contribute to a forum such as that. And it's something we could look at in preparing a report for this committee if members were keen on that. But we do have talent out there outside of the enormous talent in this Zoom meeting, and it would be a good thing perhaps to make use of it. And you know, more opinions and more expertise, the better we can serve our district. And if people are willing to give their time, I'd like to take them up on it. But that's perhaps a matter for officers and members to consider. So members, I'd ask you to note the first part of the report, to agree, as in paragraph 2.2, to distribute the £50,000 Recovering High Street Fund as proposed. As I say, I hope that £6,000 won't be needed for the licensing proposal. We'll be able to use it elsewhere. And then if you are minded, to agree that a report be prepared for the next policy meeting of a subcommittee to oversee the economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I've Councillor Mulligan, then Heseltine, and then Brockbank. So, will Councillor Mulligan, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I welcome the report, Simon. I think it's very good. I think it's absolutely vital that the council does everything in its power to support the local economy as we come out of lockdown. And I also welcome the idea of the subcommittee, which I think, and as you say, to have some outside expertise on it as well.
You're very quiet, Councillor Mulligan.
Sorry?
You're very quiet.
Sorry, you can't hear me. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just saying, I also welcome the idea of the subcommittee and having some outside expertise. I just had two questions. There's one, it seems there's a proposal to pedestrianize Skipton High Street. I just wonder whether, if we were going to do that, whether we've had any consultation with Highways as to sort of the consequences of the traffic flow around Skipton if we were to do that. And then the second thing I just wanted to mention was, it's on the paragraph 6 above it, right at the top there, place and infrastructure. We're all seeing this talk about creating a Wi-Fi networks and, you know, making sure we have hyper-fast broadband. I'm always confused by that because I think that's North Yorkshire County Council's responsibility. As I understand it, they've rolled out high-speed broadband. They're in the third phase of it, and when they're finished, that's going to be 95% of the county. So I don't know what our relationship is, but I don't also know why we're saying that we're going to install Wi-Fi networks in some of the bigger towns. So I don't know who could answer both of those questions, but thank you, Chair.
Well, perhaps I'll let David talk about Wi-Fi if he's happy to. But that's the proposal for Skipton, and it's an association with the BID and Skipton Town Council. It's a project that we've already put some sort of flesh on the bones. In terms of the high street, Patrick, the current arrangements for it being shut on 3 days to vehicles is with the agreement of North Yorkshire Highways. And it seems to be working well. And of course, we're not back up to perhaps the degree of traffic that we might normally have at this time of the year. But my experience of being in the centre of town on days when that's operating has been that it seems to be working quite well, and without causing chaos. But I'm not always in Skipton, and members may have different experience of it, but so far I thought it was working quite well, and it seems to be welcomed by the stall holders and the retailers. I think we could sort of design it a little bit better, but that's not really it's not our market, but I think it could be designed rather better, but that's a different matter. But David, on Wi-Fi.
Yes, just on just generally on all the projects. Virtually all the projects will use other partners, funding, powers, expertise, whatever. So a lot of these projects, whether on our list or the county's list, are collaborative projects. So that's by its very nature. In terms of broadband and Wi-Fi, you're right, the County Council are leading on bringing broadband to 95% of the population. Sadly, that 5% is often the very rural bits. So there will still plan to be some areas which don't have it. So there will be some small gaps, and certainly the work which David Iton is very much aware of in the north of the district in terms of work for Barn and how they've rolled it out and things have been very positive. I think the key thing we're looking at though is what happens once the pipe gets into the town and village. How do you then put the Wi-Fi on which covers the town so that people can just sign up to it and things. So although the county will bring what they call the backhaul into the town, it's then how do ourselves and businesses actually make the best use of that? And so it's that interface between that backhaul and the customer.
Thank you.
Yeah, good use of the term backhaul just to confuse everybody, David, so that nobody understands what that means. But anyway, no, I mean, we've always worked together with the county council throughout the rollout of broadband. I mean, Andrew Laycock's been sort of instrumental as the man on the ground at our end of the council, you know, working with your county council colleagues through that. So, I mean, it's going to be vital, the amount of people who've been working from home, who I think consider, you know, now working from home, not necessarily to be the full-time norm, but certainly to be more of the norm. We need to have more and more people, you know, with that access. I think buying and selling a house, it will be crucial for a lot of people now over the next few years as to whether it's got good broadband as part of it. Talking to people who've now got broadband and we can see them online, Councillor Heseltine.
I think we need to congratulate David Smurthwaite for a very clear report. Thank you, David. I noticed what all you experts have to say on Skipton High Street, but it was a necessity to get the market up and running that we had to take the initiative and turn things around and close the High Street for these 3 days on a trial basis. And Craven District assisted, of course. North Yorkshire were more than cooperative with traffic movements and closing the High Street. It does appear to be exceptionally popular with the public, and it's the public that we do serve. The report itself, I can fully support it, and if no one's moved the recommendations, I'll move those for you, Richard. What I will just draw to your attention is item 7, paragraph 7, on this member involvement. Mr. Smurthwaite knows very well I've been pursuing him for years about resurrecting the Economic Development Subcommittee of Policy to drive the economy of Craven. I think our role as members and Craven District Council is more than just overseeing the economic recovery. To overseeing and promoting the economy of Craven. It isn't just a short-term involvement from members. Without a sound economy, I sound like the Prime Minister, don't I? Without a sound economy, none of society works. So well done, David. I've got through to you at last. Well done. Your proposals are moved.
I think you're seconding, Councillor Heseltine, but that's fine. I think you're seconding.
Seconded a third, it don't matter. Let's be moving on.
Right. Councillor Brockbank.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a couple of things regarding recovery. One is that we used to apparently have what was called a tourism forum. I don't know anything about it, never heard anything about it, but it was mentioned to me when they would like to see us bring back our tourism forum. And now seems like a good time as part of the COVID-19 recovery. I know that there are some business owners have said that they would be very happy to take part in that forum. So I did send an email to Paul Ellis on Monday. I'm sorry, I've been swapping over my hardware today, so I don't know whether or not I've had a reply. So I do apologise if I've had a reply. But what I want to know is what does the council think about as rekindling that tourism forum, and who is going to take that on board? And the other is, again, with leisure, wild camping. Apparently in North Craven, I can't speak for the rest of Craven, but certainly North Craven, around Staincliffe and those areas. There are motorhomes parking in various places, laybys, which probably belong to North Yorkshire County Council. Some might be private land, car parks. And they are taking business away from the touring caravan parks and from our camping sites, which all pay business rates and are licensed. And whether or not there ought to be something that we should do about discouraging people from motorhomes, especially from parking in laybys and encouraging them to use our licensed facilities. That's it. Thank you.
I can certainly come back on. If you look at the tables under 5 and 5.2, Linda, the second page down, it's reconstitute the Yorkshire Dales Tourism Partnership with Richmondshire and the Yorkshire Dales National Park. It's never really gone away. It exists National Park side. We've probably done less with it, and Welcome to Yorkshire basically used to ignore it, but the new chief exec is very much keen to become part of it again. So I think we will link in with that. But if you look in that right hand side box on that table 5, it's very much in there that we're definitely going to get that properly resurrected, and both ourselves and Welcome to Yorkshire at the table at that as well, to listen to the public. As far as the other one goes, I suppose it's either highways, county council issue. I'm not really clear. If somebody, David, do you want to come in on that one, or Paul?
I think the key point, probably both parts actually, is about how do we try and get more money out of visitors. So we need to create a wealth out of all the footfall we get. So whether it's people while camping, but as you said, how do we encourage them to get into our towns and villages to actually support them? So I think probably need a comprehensive look at all the accommodation that we provide across the whole patch. We've had one meeting with the National Park and Richmondshire to kick off the partnership. And this came up as one of the key issues, that we don't have the full range. And some of it may be wild camping as a positive introduction. Other things, we need to get people paying to go to restaurants and so on. So yeah, I think we need a comprehensive look at all these types of issues.
Looking round, nobody else is waving, signalling, looking. Oh, Councillor Rose, go for it. We'll teach you to use the raise hand function, Councillor Rose.
Another day. Apologies. I've got a couple of issues I'd like to raise, if I may. Thank you. Looking at the whole table, themes, actions and descriptions, it almost needs a fourth column with precise examples of what we can actually do. For example, if we look at supporting the unemployed, and it reads to ensure that they don't find themselves unemployed for too long, I'd be happy to see in the future, in the very near future, exactly how are we going to do that? Precise examples. So I think the whole table is excellent, some really good ideas and so on, but I'm looking forward, if you like, to the next column, column 4, that gives a precise example of what will be taking place. The second thing, funnily enough, cycle lanes. Have we got any news on the possibility of pop-up cycle lanes? I know that there's money available. I appreciate it's more, well, possibly more county and North Yorkshire highways, but if we are looking at improving conditions for pedestrians and particularly cyclists, do we have any news on these pop-up cycle lanes? And then my third point, if I may make, home working and working hubs. I'm sure you've come across Quirky on Otley Street in Skipton, and what an excellent provision that is for people who are working from home but wish to work from a hub rather than their own back room. So that's an excellent example of something that we're obviously looking for in the future. So if we are looking at a group perhaps of people, expertise, those involved with setting that particular project up may be worth referring to. Thank you.
On the first one, there will be a more detailed action plan. This is sort of, I mean, it's not high level thinking. It goes into some detail, but completely agree, Councillor Rose. It does need more. She disappeared, but it does need more detail in that behind it, and we'll be working it up. And yeah, having not dealt with a vast amount of unemployed within Craven, I do think we've got a bit of a shock coming if that does end up being the case, and we need to be on it and make sure those people are retraining. We've always nearly had an employment shortage, so it's making sure that in that shortage, you know, the people, because it's bound to be the young that it affects, but there's a fair chance, and therefore we need to get them retrained as quickly as possible into those businesses that have always been short of staff, and now there's an opportunity, I think. As far as your pop-up cycle lanes, I'm not sure, and I think we do need to look at these small scale offices, and I think we need to look at them right across the patch, you know, not just in Skipton, but even in the rural communities where some people aren't too keen on working from home, but do think that you know, they no longer need to make that massive commute into town, and nor should they, you know, for the sake of the environment and the bank balances and the sanity of making that massive commute. David, do you want to come back on cycle lanes, or Paul?
In terms of the pop-up ones, the only one, it wouldn't describe as cycle lane, but I know they're talking to the retailers along Court Street about how they can improve accessibility for cycling and walking, because at present it's difficult because of the one-way system. I don't think they've come to a conclusion yet on how that'll be done. Beyond that, though, we've still got the funding from the Leeds City Region pot, the 5.8 million, which should be available to us in March next year, to comprehensively look at cycling and walking within Skipton. So again, it's quite Skipton focused, but it's where the funding is going to at present. So yes, I think that's one of the things we want to look at in terms of the longer term, is really about trying to find the silver lining in all this, and whether it's the modal shift away from cars or whether it's local working and things. I think there's a lot we can do which can try and keep the trend going.
I've got Councillor Brockbank and then Councillor Myers to sum up, if that's all right.
Thank you. Yes, it's regarding youngsters and school leavers, like you just said, and employment for them. Obviously, anyone leaving school after doing their A levels this year, or even their O levels, want of a better word, are in an absolutely devastating position, because they can't go. Go to any job fairs, or with lockdown. So I just wondered, have we got any plans, and if not, perhaps we could think about having a job fair. I don't know how we do it, but and maybe we could have a virtual job fair, for example, and getting major employers, just not necessarily just employers from Craven, but you know, big employers. There are lots of engineering firms in West Yorkshire, which is quite close to us. You know, we've got Bradford and Keighley, and perhaps we could think of some sort of a virtual job fair for school leavers who are leaving this year. I don't know what you think about that idea, but I know it's a desperate situation for them.
I would say nothing's off the table at all, in that we need to do absolutely everything we can. I think we need to see state of tourism post 4th of July, Are people going to start booking? Are they going to come back? Are people too scared to leave their homes? We'll get an idea how well that sector bounces back, I would think, fairly quickly. And if that sector is struggling, then we've got a lot of people who are going to be struggling employment-wise, and a lot of them the younger end. So, but yes, we'll do anything if anybody comes up with an idea that might be a good fix, and to get people, you know, in touch with a job. Why not? Councillor Myers.
Yeah, as I say, you know, all ideas are welcome. The reason there is room left to put flesh on the bone of these proposals and tables is because they are, by nature, they're going to be multi-agency initiatives. Craven cannot on its own solve unemployment or create jobs for people. We're going to have to work closely with many other agencies in order to achieve that. And of course, the other thing at the moment we don't know is whether any funding will be forthcoming. And we've obviously all heard Richard speak earlier about the financial status of the council and the fears we all have going forward. So at the moment, it's very early days in terms of what we can afford to do, who we can do it with, and so on. But we've a determination to do it. And, you know, officers I know will work hard with all the other agencies. And as I say, if we have our subcommittee, if members have ideas, all the better. Let's work together to do it. There's no monopoly on ideas on how you help people who become unemployed. The sadness is, of course, it isn't just the young who will suffer, as we know, the pinch of 171% rise in unemployment. And we're very mindful of that. We have to, as I say, looking forward, it isn't just about getting people into the sort of jobs that were, because it's all at short notice, but they put together a really good plan. So thank you.
Don't mute yourself, Vicky.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's been moved and seconded. So if I can call out members' names, and if you can say whether you're for, against or abstaining from the recommendations in the report, please. Councillor Barrett.
For.
Councillor Brockbank.
For.
Councillor Heseltine.
For.
Councillor Ireton.
For.
Councillor Liss.
For.
Councillor Mulligan.
For.
Councillor Myers.
For.
Councillor Noland.
For.
Councillor Place.
For.
Councillor Rose.
For.
Councillor Welsh.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
And then Chairman, Councillor Foster.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
And we're definitely getting better and quicker at doing that. So I think it's the most annoying part of this whole meeting on Zoom. But anyway, moving on. Agenda item 7. Spatial Planning Committee and getting it back up and running and getting it fit for purpose as the right terms of reference, so that we can move forward and take into account some of the updated legislation, get it to review that and update as necessary, and also work towards the 5-year review. You know, take a decent hard look at the local plan we've got as it unfolds, see where development's going over the next few years, and slowly bring forward, you know, recommendations about, you know, the review of the local plan at least at 5 years, and be ready. And also, you know, looking ahead to a new local plan at some point, even though we've only just got a current one. But it's a case of I think it's the best body. It worked very well at delivering the local plan, and from my mind, using this organisation as, you know, as a subgroup of the policy committee to look in detail at these things is a far better bet than bringing all these items to policy and probably giving a bit too light a stroke over. Really, you know, we some of these things need a proper deep dive, and I think spatial planning's as good a forum as any to do that in. So, David, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that seems fine. Yeah.
So happy to move the recommendations from the chair. Anybody wanting to speak on this? Councillor Myers.
I'll second it, Chairman. Yeah, just to say, Councillor Staveley and I had a sort of pre-meeting of the Spatial Planning Committee the other day, and it's very important we get it up and running. It's very important that we review our policies. I know from the very unfortunate odd occasion when I have to sit in planning meetings that although we've declared a climate change emergency, it doesn't seem that some of our planning policies have caught up with that. It's very important that they do. And I think we do actually have the policies there, but it's just they need interpreting in the right way. And so there's quite a lot of work for spatial planning to do, and it must happen. And I'm very keen, as is Councillor Staveley, that particularly aspects like that are got on with. And it's not something that we want to be saying in 5 years' time, oh, we found a way of being a bit greener. No, we have to do it now. And so there's a lot to do, and the sooner up and running, the better.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to back up what Councillor Myers has said, that but my disappointment is there's no explicit reference to the climate emergency in this report. So yes, I'm sure it's all at the front of our mind, and we're building back greener, stronger, fairer, all the rest of it. But shouldn't it say in the report and explicitly refer to that, so that anybody working towards it is always reminded?
I won't let them forget, Councillor Nolan, don't you worry.
Yes, but shouldn't it explicitly state that in as a, you know, in the terms of reference? That's my point.
Councillor,
I don't see it. I may be wrong. I apologise if I'm wrong, but I can't see any mention of it, the climate emergency, and the fact that we unanimously declared it as a council.
David, do you want to come back on that, or?
Yeah, the purpose of this report is just about the terms and conditions. Oh, sorry, not terms and conditions, terms of reference, terms and conditions.
You see it's apply.
Yeah. But in terms of the review of the local plan, and there'll be other things which we'll want to bring in as well and emphasize much more strongly. And so a net zero carbon craven is a key thing. So as Councillor Meyer said, there's a number of things which we can do now, but there's more we could probably do as well. And so that's where the review will come in. And there'll be other aspects which we'll want to look at as time unfolds and as what members want to review and consider. So at present, this is just about these terms of reference. But clearly, as the work of the special planning group will include much more about the stronger, fairer, greener, and what other areas members wish to emphasize.
I'm sort of looking at the recommendations and through the report. It's not definitively in there, but we have declared a climate emergency, so therefore all deliberations should involve around it, shouldn't they? And I'd be horrified if this committee decided to do everything without doing, you know, ignoring climate change as part of it. So because we've declared a climate emergency, I don't think we need to declare it in every document. It's there. It's you know, it's ingrained through the entirety now of the council, or it should be. So I'm happy not to alter the recommendations. I'm happy to leave it as it is, but the chair and vice chair and everybody else of that are more than happy to carry on, and I'm sure the members will be. Councillor Ayrton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I tend to agree with Councillor Nolan. I think it wouldn't do any harm to put that into your terms of reference. We're talking here of no doubt looking at planning policy, and surely we need some of these things in planning policy. I know a lot of the points should be covered by building regulations, you know, i.e. how we get renewable energy out of developments. But I don't think it would do any harm to put that in, would it, Chairman? Thank you.
Looking at 3.3, adopt Craven local plan and work relating to future reviews. Can it be put in there somewhere, David? You know, with taking into account zero carbon Craven.
So I'm jumping between documents. Would you want it to, is it for the report that you want it in terms of emphasize, or do you want it in the terms of reference?
Terms of reference.
Terms of reference, that's what I thought. So yeah. Therefore we could add a line in, does no harm, but strengthens it, in terms of, yeah, working towards whether it's a greener, cleaner, safer, whatever, want to take, or do we want to go to embed the climate emergency statement about net zero by 2030?
I think we can do that. Yeah, yeah. Let's embed it, and then it's there. I mean, it's here.
Yeah.
I don't mind seeing it in a document. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll just add it to the document. We'll accept the document as it stands with the recommendation that it is put in, and if it has to go through it like a Blackpool through a piece of rock, then so be it. Councillor Nolan.
Okay, if it's going to be added somehow as a caveat in there or an amendment, then I'll accept that. I'm happy with the report then as it is. Thank you.
Unmute. So with that in mind, members, have nobody else waving or doing anything? Have we actually got a recommendation for sort of 2.3 that it's going to be added? Annette or Vicky?
Well, I think, Chairman, if we just include in the recommendation that we amend the terms of reference to put a sentence in about embedding the climate emergency statement to be zero by 2030 or words to that effect. Is that okay? And put that in the terms of reference.
That sounds good. So if I put that in as a 2.3, looking around the room if members are right. So yeah, we're voting on. I'm willing. I think whoever moved it, if I didn't.
It was you, Chairman, and Councillor Myers seconded the report.
I'm happy to accept that change at 2.3. Councillor Myers. Likewise. So yeah.
Happy with that. Happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to the vote, Vicky, on 2.1 now to 2.23.
Okay, and I'll start with you, Chairman.
I'm for.
Okay, Councillor Barrett.
For.
Councillor Brockbank.
For.
Councillor Heseltine.
For.
Councillor Ayrton.
For.
Councillor Liss.
For.
Councillor Mulligan.
Abstain.
Abstain. Right, thank you. Councillor Myers.
For.
Councillor Noland.
For.
Councillor Place.
For.
Councillor Rose.
For.
Councillor Welsh.
Appears to have disappeared.
Right, okay. Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Okay, so that's that's 10 in favour and 1 abstention, and obviously Councillor Welsh doesn't appear to be in the meeting at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Vicky. Agenda item 8, really just to note, it's summary of decisions taken by the Chief Executive during the COVID-19 outbreak. If you'd like to sum up his reasons for his actions. No, I mean, it's there in front of us. I'm looking around for any member comment or questions or queries as to why, what was done when and how. I think they've all
Not the report, Chairman.
Right, thank you. They've all been before, members, so I'm happy to second from the chair. I'm looking around for hand waving or signalling or anything. Do we need to take a vote again?
Just for the purpose of the meeting, yeah. So we could just take a very quickly. Sorry to be a pain, everyone. If we could just take a vote, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, and 4.
Chairman, yeah, for Councillor Barrett.
4.
Councillor Brockbank. 4. Councillor Heseltine.
4.
Councillor Ireton.
4.
Councillor Liss.
4.
Councillor Mulligan.
Sorry, what are we voting for?
You're voting for agenda item 8 to note the decisions taken by the Chief Executive during the outbreak. 4. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Myers. Councillor Noland.
4.
Councillor Place.
4.
Councillor Rose.
4.
I don't think we've got Councillor Welsh, have we? Okay. Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Okay. Thank you. That's everybody for the recommendation, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. So we're up to items for confirmation.
Thank you, Chairman. There aren't any tonight.
Excellent. So on that note, thank you very much, members. Thank you for bearing with the Zoom meeting again. The voting's a bit steady, but other than that, everything else seems to work well.
Before you close, could I ask a question?
Oh yes, Councillor Heseltine, go for it.
Bearing in mind the what the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box this afternoon and confirmed at his briefing later this afternoon, where from July the 4th, those of you that wish to go into public houses can be no more than a yard apart in public for as long as you like. How far off are we off meeting face to face again in committee? Did you get that question? Mr. Shevlin might answer. Nice to see you, Paul. I hope you're all right, lad.
We haven't been told, Councillor Heseltine, so when we do know, we'll make decisions on which meetings we do and which we don't. I think we need to have a proper meeting of council to how many of those meetings need to be done in person and how many of those meetings we can do through this system.
Well, logic says if you can meet in public houses a yard apart, we can meet in public for our meetings face to face.
We haven't been given permission yet. When we are, we will. Do you want to go in with anything, Paul, Chief Exec Paul?
There's no relaxation at all for meetings of that nature at this moment. We clearly keep an eye on the announcements, which I believe won't be every night from now on, in order to try and interpret it both for meetings and the way we service the meetings themselves, but also for the public, the businesses, and indeed our own business. So we do keep a careful eye, and especially on the guidance that sometimes follows slightly later.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to see maybe, Robert, is a hybrid of these meetings whereby, you know, some people can go into a room and meet if they require, and some people can do it online, and people can look in and watch democracy, because I think there's various ways around we can do this and have successful meetings. We can make decisions on Zoom. We're about to see watch a planning committee make decisions as it's been doing at the national park. So, you know, it's not impossible to do meetings like this. And I think we need to think of the carbon footprint of the likes of Councillors Ireton, myself, and Councillor Brockbank, trailing down from Bentham, and those coming up from South Craven. So I think we need to make a proper decision on this when we do get the opportunity to go back to having a meeting as to how many we have and when we have them and where we have them. But anyway, and we will do that. It won't be we're going to do this. Okay, members, thank you.
Just my lawyer's mind, Chairman, but perhaps if we served a pint and charged for it, we could have our meeting.
I'm sure the licensing committee wouldn't give us a license, Councillor Foster.
I'm sure
Oh, yes, it would.
Good night, all.
Good night. Cheers, members. Thank you.
Yeah, good night.